Number 9. Lima the cat. It appears that at least one feline has a serious issue with the idea that canines are truly man's best friend. In Pearland, Texas, back in 2010, Miss Sherry Woods was attacked by 2 extremely large pit bulls right outside their home. Right as they were about to attack, their friendly female feline Lima leaped in between them, hissing, spitting, and scratching at the much larger dogs. The pits were distracted by Lima long enough for her husband to quickly pull her into the house, and everyone thankfully escaped unscathed. Number 8. Selena the Jack Russell Terrier. Rebecca Northern was enjoying some time in the pool back in the summer of 2010. In a freak accident, she broke her neck while diving. Her whole body went numb and she quickly began to lose consciousness. Noting his owner's distress, her heroic Jack Russell Terrier Selena leaped into the pool, jammed himself under Rebecca's shoulder, and swam her all the way to the shallow end, where he then helped her out of the water and onto the lawn, where she was eventually found by her mother before being rushed to the local hospital. Number 7. An unnamed rabbit. Believe it or not, even tiny pets like rabbits can save the lives of their owners. One rabbit owner living in Alaska was fortunate enough to have the family rabbit wake them up one night by scratching her chest. She then quickly determined that the house was on fire and was able to wake the rest of their family in enough time to make it out safely. Not a moment too soon, as it turns out, unfortunately, the little rabbit was not quite so lucky, and he later perished due to the complications from smoke inhalation. Number 6. Mila the beluga whale. One day, the Polar Land Aquarium in China decided they needed a new whale trainer. In what has to be one of the strangest job interviews ever, applicants had to compete against one another for the position by diving into a 20-foot deep tank of water at near Arctic temperatures, all without safety or breathing gear. However, after reaching the bottom of the pool, 26-year-old Yang Yun's leg began to cramp up. Panicking, she quickly began to choke and likely would have died if not for one of the aquarium's beluga whales, Mila. Grabbing onto the trainer's leg, the whale quickly pushed Miss Yang to the surface. Onlookers all agree that she likely would have not survived without his help. Number 5. Wild lions. If you are wounded and helpless, you could be forgiven for thinking that a pack of wild lions showing up could be just about the worst thing ever. However, that wasn't the case for one extremely lucky 12-year-old girl from Kenya. Abducted from her home in an attempt to force her to become a child bride, 3 lions were drawn to her cries and frightened off the kidnappers. They then proceeded to guard her for the better part of the day until they were located by a team of police hunting for the girl, who they finally let take her. Number 4. Charlie the Macaw. Most everyone thinks that parrots are adorable, especially when talking. But what most people don't realize is that some of these beaks they've got can do quite a bit of damage, as a couple of burglars found out in Fort Smith, Arkansas. After tricking an elderly gentleman to letting them into his home, they began beating and robbing him. However, his pet macaw Charlie wasn't about to take this sitting still, so to speak, and began squawking and biting at the intruders. After ripping a substantial chunk of flesh out of the arm of one of the robbers, the 2 men decided they had better escape while they still could. Charlie and his owner made it through the ordeal completely unharmed as a result. Getting into our top 3 is Binti Jua, the gorilla. Most people are aware that gorillas can be extremely territorial and violent creatures in the right circumstances. However, it appears that they have a soft spot for children, even when the child is from a completely different species. At a zoo in Illinois, a 3-year-old boy accidentally fell over the fence and into the gorilla enclosure. The near 20-foot fall left him bleeding, unconscious, and with a serious head injury. Onlookers, zoo personnel, and even police were helpless, as rushing into the enclosure to save the boy could potentially set off a series of animal attacks or worse. However, one of the matriarchs of this particular gorilla group, known as Binti Jua, stepped in, picked up the boy, and proceeded to lovingly cradle him before delivering him to the enclosure door at the waiting hands of the paramedics. Number 2. Kerry the horse. In what has to be one of the strangest bits of animal trivia, more people are killed each year by cows than sharks. This might seem puzzling until one remembers that the average cow weighs about 1,000 pounds and is more than capable of tossing you around like a ragdoll, should you happen to piss one off. In Scotland, one Fiona Boyd learned this the hard way. A calf on her farm needed medical attention, and unfortunately Mama Heifer decided they didn't want poor Miss Boyd anywhere near her little one. She charged Miss Boyd and proceeded to body slam her 4 or 5 times, and then rolled on top of her to crush her. Miss Boyd was saved from a certain death when her horse, Carrie, heard the commotion from nearby and ran to her rescue. Carrie was able to land a few powerful kicks on the cow and eventually drive it away from her owner. While this fight was going on, Miss Boyd was able to crawl to safety under an electric fence 20 feet away, ultimately only needing medical treatment for cuts and bruises. Finishing off our countdown is number 1, Lulu the pot-bellied pig. Joanne and Jack Altsman had agreed to babysit her daughter's giant 150-pound pot-bellied pig named Lulu, and eventually adopted it. Lulu would repay their generosity one day in spades by saving Joanne's life. Joanne suffered a heart attack one afternoon and was unable to move or call for help, and completely alone except for Lulu. Lulu figured out how to unlatch the fence, then walked to the nearest highway. She then proceeded to lay down in traffic in an attempt to get cars to stop for her. When no one did, she would go back to check on Joanne and then head back to the road to try again. After nearly an hour of this behavior, a car finally stopped and the occupants followed the anxious piggy back to Joanne's side, ultimately finding her and calling for medical assistance.